Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey, everybody. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. Carol is the founder of the Career Rebel Academy for high-achieving women at midlife, ready to overcome the self-doubts and limiting beliefs that keep them designing an epic career and life they love. Now, who wouldn't want that? She's an award-winning certified career and personal brand strategist, life and executive coach, a TEDx presenter, author, international keynote, and member of the Forbes Coaches Council and Newsweek's expert forum and local career expert on AM Northwest Morning Show. Serving as a catalyst for transformational growth, confidence, and career life alignment, Carol leverages her JD and PhD and multiple certifications, along with her experience as an attorney in executive leadership and psychology and organizational systems to help 6 to 7 figure successful driven female professionals and entrepreneurs amplify their visibility and do the meaningful work they're meant to do in the world without sacrificing their years of success, hard work, and income. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love that. That just makes me feel good about myself hearing all that.
Well, you have a lot to feel good about. You have done so much in your life. It's amazing how much you've accomplished by the age of 28. I can't believe it.
I know. And I just turned 28 again.
I know. It's incredible. And you don't look a day over 26. It's incredible. But thank you for joining us from Vancouver, Washington, the first Vancouver, as you informed me. So, Carol, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to start with the beginning or the early years. And sometimes our earliest years have something to do with our formative years and how we landed where we are today. Now, you've done a lot of different things over the years, but I'm curious, where would you like to begin in telling your story?
Yeah, that's always a fabulous question. For me, I think it's important to talk about really how I was grounded in the midst of two narratives, of my mom, who was a Southern belle whose aspirations for me were to find a husband that could take care of me. And because those were her options and that was her idea of what success looked like, for women growing up in the South in the 30s and 40s. And on the other side, I had my dad, who was, I think, a feminist way before it was, popular for that to be, who raised his girls in particular, even though we had a big family, but really raised his girls to feel like we were independent and we could do whatever we wanted to do, and that the world was our oyster, and that we didn't have to depend on anyone in order to achieve our success. And so just growing up with those two really competing narratives, even though it worked for my parents in whatever way, it was always conflict within me to really think about my path. My path, rather, I really leaned more toward my father's, proclivities and really went for that, ambition. And being raised by somebody who's teaching you how to be independent is hard to kind of acquiesce to somebody else's idea of who I should be or what I should do.
Right.
So I think when I think back over my life, a lot of what has driven me to achieve what I've achieved or done what I've done was my dad and my dad's voice of, go for it. And that's really what inspired me.
And my sense is, because we of course had a conversation before we turned on record, my sense is that these are things you really wanted. It wasn't like your mother was at one extreme end and your father was at the other extreme end, pushing, telling you, be a lawyer and then get your doctorate and do all these things. Those were choices that you made, and you had his full support. And your mother, she was, at the other end saying, find a husband, make sure you're taken care of. And, that your mother had your best interests at heart. She wanted to make sure that you had a good life in her eyes of what a good life looked like. And they just were two different versions of what a good life would look like. But it wasn't like, I grew up in the metropolitan New York area where everybody was so fiercely driven, like, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a this, be a that. The sense I'm getting is that you were encouraged to just be the best you could be, as opposed to being a something.
Exactly. That was exactly right. Yeah. There was no game plan on what that would look like. It was just whatever. My father's emphasis was, whatever you decide to do, just let it be what you want to do, that you love to do. And don't let whatever it is you do decide to do, don't let anything stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
And my mother's was more prescriptive around finding someone
right
to support me. Which I think she gave up at some point because I was fiercely independent. I think she thought no man would actually deal with me. so I think maybe she got on board with my dad after a while, but it wasn't, a point. The only thing I think that was really prescribed was that go to college. And I appreciate that. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I definitely appreciate the opportunity that he believed it would give for me. Mm-hmm. And my father's family comes from, people who are highly educated.
Right.
And so that was, reinforced in our family from his perception, of what would create the right path for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like that felt like a natural path for you. Mm-hmm. So you grew up with these two narratives and you kind of struggled with them, but at the same time, you really followed a path that felt right for you. And you and your mother made peace with that somewhere along the way, right?
Yeah, we did make peace with it. It was, the part of the thing that fueled that is that ultimately, my parents divorced, and I watched my mother not have the same opportunities because her focus was so on being taken care of that she didn't think about her education or her path or preparing herself to be able to withstand anything regardless of that situation. And I think watching that also reinforced, by the time we were in high school, this was going on. And so it just reinforced for me my father's messaging of really looking after myself. And so, and even becoming a lawyer, all of that, again, it was just me being in experiences and exploring opportunities and seeing what was out there for me. And, I remember a lot of naysayers when I told people I wanted to go to law school, and people telling me, oh, are you sure you want to do that? And not because I didn't have the education or the grades or that type of thing, but what I really live by today, which I think is very true, is that people can't see beyond their own limitations. Mm-hmm. So if they can't see it for themselves, then they have a hard time seeing it for you.
Yeah.
And that taught me really early on that it's so important that you, your dreams don't need to be shared with everybody, that you need to find people who can really be stewards of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because you could get caught in this idea of what you can't do and buying into these naysayers or buying into these limiting beliefs when you surround yourself with people who don't see that as a possibility. And,
right.
Even in my own family, my mother's side of the family, there were definitely barriers and limits into what they thought was possible.
Right.
And I think, my mother's narrative was what she thought was the highest you can go. Whereas my father, being around something different, knew that there was more. And so it taught me from that experience, and also listening to others, that you really have to be careful who you share your dreams with, and that you have to remember that people can't see beyond what they can see for themselves. Right. So don't let other people's opinions really dictate what it is that you can or cannot do.
Right. And I would add to that and say, and once you've shared that with people, if you don't know what their vision is, if you do get that response, hold tight to what's coming from within you. You know, that's why I have worked from the inside out, because if you go from the outside in, you are going to absorb all that, you know, that feedback, those reactions from other people. And you have to see that those responses, those reactions, that's a reflection of them and their experience, like you just said. And, you know, I think sometimes when you declare that you're going to take something on that's challenging, and it leaves other people perhaps feeling like, oh, that's something they wouldn't try. And so then they're going to express their doubts in response to your engaging with that. And it's, you know, it gets tricky, but at the same time, if you can see it for what it is and still hold on to what you want for yourself, which clearly you did, I think it makes you stronger in some ways, you know?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely agree with that. You know, it reinforces something inside of yourself when you actually go for it and could do it. And you start to realize that you do start listening to yourself. It's one of the reasons why I believe so strongly, particularly for women, I will say, you know, I believe so strongly in finding a community of support and a community of connection of people who are like-minded, who can hold you up and lift you up and encourage you through, because there's so many, I mean, women just generally from a societal nature have gotten so many derogatory and limiting messages that, you know, we're already fighting with those that are internally within our head, that we need that other support for the ones that may come to us externally to just help to reinforce what's on the inside, to reinforce what you believe, to reinforce what you know is true. And so I just believe strongly in just having communities of support, like finding your people who are right there with you so that you can hold each other accountable, lift each other up, and support each other through the process. Because it is hard. You will come up with times thinking, should I be doing this? Maybe I should. There definitely were times where I'm like, well, maybe I should just find a husband.
I think it can wear you down, right? These are people who love you, and you start to listen to that, and you start to, you know, it kind of cracks through, and you start to take it in. I'm curious, at what point did you decide you wanted to go to law school? And what was your thinking when you did decide? What was your motivation for going to law school?
Yeah, there were two motivations. The first motivation was working. I was working my way through college and having really, really bad bosses and people who were unfair or unethical or too harsh, and, you know, just really not having, you know, I had some good bosses, but I definitely had some bad ones. And I thought, I want to do something that really helps people protect themselves from those type of situations. That was one. The other thing was, one of my positions, I was a legal secretary for a small law firm, and I just loved watching them. I loved delivering like their stuff to court and sitting in the background and watching them, and just like their whole little world of writing depositions and interviewing clients. It just was fascinating to me. And so I kind of put the two together, and that's what made me think, you know, I think I want to go to law school. And so I did, and focused on labor and employment law, and, you know, definitely did plaintiff's work. Now, I will say, interestingly enough, is something, you know, as a young, early 20-year-old, you know, 22, 3-year-old person thinking about that being the option, after I practiced, well, during my practice, but definitely by the time I was, you know, kind of sunsetting on practicing after doing it for 10 years, I realized probably what I really wanted to do, which is what I ultimately then moved into, was organizational consulting. And while I thought my option was to sue them for being bad employers, I thought, no, really what I want to do is help them to become better employers. I want to create a space that can help the organization be a better organization that appreciates its greatest assets, which are the people that work for them. And so once I realized that actually was a thing in a career, I transitioned and did that and became an organizational consultant for a lot of years. And so I did a lot of coaching and work group development and, facilitating and training leaders and emerging leaders and senior leaders. And I really enjoyed that work. And that was more aligned with even my own nature and my values, which are more mediative than adversarial. Law is. And so when I kind of leaned in and tapped into what made sense for me, that was right for me, I found that piece of work and loved it. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you were practicing law. I want to just back up for a minute and fill in a few things in the story. So you were during your undergrad years, you were also working at the same time. You were and you had some bad bosses.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. And although it didn't move me to want to go to law school, it just made me want to run in the other direction. But it didn't even make me want to become a runner either. So you started thinking about law school, and then were you a legal secretary also while you were in school, or was that post undergrad?
No, well, that was one of the positions I had working through school. I was a legal secretary. I really was an assistant that they called a legal secretary. But so I was, their glorified gopher for a small firm. So I did a little bit of everything.
Sure.
But yeah, and so it was that was the icing on the cake. When I started working there, I thought that's what I want to do, and I think it was during that time that I put in my application. And
you went right from undergrad.
I went right from undergrad to law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you were pretty clear that labor and employment law was your interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to work, for people so that they would have a better experience at work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, that's wonderful. And so once you were immersed in that field of work, you then became aware of this other field, organizational consulting. And so you then decided to get further credentialed in that area. Tell us a little bit about how you went about that thought process and that transition.
Yeah. Well, I practiced law for a while, and I knew pretty early on, probably by the time I was in year 2 of practicing, that I wondered if I was in the right spot. And
really?
And I noticed
what made you wonder that?
Well, it's just because the nature of it was we're always fighting. And when I wanted to have more, settlement discussions or talk about what would be the best solution, a lot of my colleagues, some people love the cutthroat fighting of it. And there were times where I thought we didn't have to fight. We can actually come up with a better solution. And part of my job as an attorney is I did mediations, and I would, we did have settlement agreements, and we would kind of negotiate contracts and negotiate workplace situations and things of that nature. And so because my work wasn't always just in the courtroom, that sometimes I was working in the organization to kind of negotiate settlements, I realized that that's where I really shined. That's where I really loved my work. Now, I won my cases, particularly because some employers, if they were treating people really badly, I can be a pit bull when I want to.
Yeah.
But it was because I believed in something so strongly, as opposed to just being that way by nature. And so when I was able to have these experiences of mediation, of negotiating, of really having conversations, I realized that's the work I love to do. And so that got me, exploring, what are some of the other options. I thought about, well, do I want to be a mediator? I thought about, I started looking into other things that really fit more what I really enjoyed doing when I was an attorney. And that's when I was able to see that there was this work called organizational consulting. Or, people call it different things. It's usually housed within training and development or organizational, those type of things. And I realized that that's
industrial
really
psychology is another.
Exactly. Exactly. So I was able to, the transition, actually, I was the labor counsel for the Nurses Association. And the organization that I was usually fighting with, the managers and directors and senior leaders really enjoyed working with me because I wasn't just always fighting for the sake of the fight. I wasn't always aggressive. I really was I worked with integrity, that, I wanted the best solution. I wasn't just, being adversarial for the sake of it. So a position actually opened up in the hospital as a consultant, and they asked would I be interested because they felt you can do so much better work with us than being on the other side. And I was ready to make the transition and thought, wow, what a great opportunity. Yeah. And how awesome was it that they really said, we want you to be the one that comes over and really helps us to be better. And and so that's what introduced me into that work and moved me over.
So the hospital hired you, though, still in a legal role, but
they hired me as a consultant. They hired me in an organizational consultant role. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then so this is all still part of this sort of 10-year period when you were practicing law, though,
it was right? Coming at the tail end of my 10th year.
Oh, the tail end. Okay.
Yep. It's when I really made the transition. I practiced law from about 91 to 2001, and I took this job in 2001. And and so that started the next leg of my journey of doing, this work, which I, did for about another, 8 or 9 years.
I see. And then then you decided to get your PhD, or were you considering other avenues? Because I think it's an interesting set of choices. And when I say interesting, there's nothing behind that word interesting. I'm just, it's more of a curiosity, because I think that because, as you already said, there are so many different terms that can be used for someone who does organizational consulting. And there are a wide variety of degrees that people have that enable them to do that work. And so I'm curious how you made the decision, because you have the doctorate, but you also have other certifications. So how did you build that for you, and how did that suit you and work for you?
Yeah. So when I made the transition as doing organizational consulting, I wanted to, it's just my nature. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. And so, and I wanted to really be good at what I was doing in the transition. So I remember talking with my then manager about maybe taking a certification course or just taking some courses in this work. And I wasn't really sure where to go. Do I study HR? Where do I get some of this work? And there actually was a program specifically. There was a certificate program design in organizational management or leadership, it was. And I thought, let me do that, which she approved. And so at this point, I had been out of school for a while. I also was in the midst of, I did get married. So just in case people, so I did get married at some point, but I also was I was separating and going through a divorce around this time as well. And so being back in an academic environment studying was really, it's hard to, it was really fulfilling for me. It made me reconnect with that part of myself that was getting a little muddled in this course of the separation. And I had 2 babies, and, so I was, there were literally babies at the time. And, so being in this academic space and learning again, made me start improving my self-confidence and, knowing that I had something to offer. And so I didn't want to stop. So I kept going and then got my master's in, organizational development. And while I was doing that, the school was like, we have this PhD program. And so I decided to stay.
I see.
And in so many ways, it was more cathartic than it really was an educational endeavor.
Got it.
I always tell people that the greatest therapy I got was my doctorate program. It was really more for me than it was for anything else. I did not need to get a doctorate. There was no requirement to do this work to have a doctorate, but I was so loving being engrossed in this education this educational model. And the program that I went through was it was designed for adult learners. It was Fielding Graduate University specifically. And it was designed for you to bring your questions. So things you wanted to study, things you were interested in, as opposed to more research-based or traditional doctorate programs.
I see.
That you kind of join somebody else's research and you kind of try to fit what they're doing because you're joining their work, as opposed to you developing your work, your question, your research, methodology that you want to take. So because it was so centered in me, taking your words inside out, it was so designed for you to bring yourself fully to the program.
Right.
Oh my goodness. It was like therapy. So I was studying and researching and reading about people and things that I never would have come across before, and answering questions that I had specifically around identity development and how women do come to an understanding of who they are. How do we, define our identity in antithesis of all the messages that we get? How do we become who we are? And, interesting enough, Bell Hooks, who passed yesterday, was one of the key scholars that I read that informed me about who I was and what I was. So this is my opening up of my mind and my being. It was just so amazing. And so that's really why I went. Now I was able to leverage it. I actually moved into academia.
Oh, you did?
Because of it. I did. I was, to continue the process, I was working in this, the hospital, which is a major research academic hospital institution. And I was doing work in the School of Nursing, some diversity and professional development, organizational work. And as I got the other job, the school asked would I be interested in doing the work instead of for the entire university and hospital, to do it in the school specifically. So they brought me over to do professional development and diversity work within the school. But because I was getting my doctorate, the dean wanted to put me on faculty. And so that kind of rolled into my, academic career and the next leg of my journey, where I became an associate professor. I ultimately directed a graduate program of, organizational leadership and public health, and ultimately became an associate dean. So I pivoted once again to a whole different kind of direction in my career. But interestingly enough, my research and the work that I was doing in academia was all around, helping organizations function better, but also helping women figure out who they wanted to be and what their careers and what they would step into.
Right.
And so while I was researching and publishing and talking about it, it's what led me to do what I do now. So it's interesting that this whole journey, which wasn't really prescribed by me, but just being open to opportunity, and not saying no to things, kind of like going back to my father's instruction, just allowed me to have this really rich and fulfilling career that led me to doing the consulting and coaching work I do now.
Well, it's interesting, and we will get to what you're doing now in a moment. As this all unfolded from your work in the hospital, and then, sort of dipping your toe into the certification program, right? The certificate program that, sort of evolving into the master's and the PhD, and then moving into academia. I have this image of you deciding who you wanted to be in your career and who you wanted to be. And you were studying, how this works for women. And you were kind of in your own living laboratory at the same time, really, because you were evolving. You figured out by year 2 as an attorney, wait a minute, I came into this for all the right reasons. And yet now that I'm here, I'm realizing there are pieces of this that I don't like. And there's a way in which I can still stick to my mission, but I need to find another way to do it. Like your mission really didn't change. You just needed to find another door to walk through. It sounds like.
That is so beautifully articulated. I did not know that mentally at the time.
You're too close to it, right?
Hindsight is like always 2020. Yeah, it was beautifully said, and that's exactly what happened. When I look back on it in retrospect, but yeah, at the time I wasn't quite sure, but that's exactly what it was. It's exactly what the process. And I was a living laboratory, and it's why I think I'm able to really do the work that I'm able to do now, because I've lived through it. I know the experience of it. And, it led to, what really turned the table for me is a little bit, not too far before my 50th birthday, I was in a massive car accident, a life near fatal car accident. And that, has a way of, really opening you up to what's important and where you want to spend your time. And even in academia, feeling like I wanted to do something different. Like what I realized is that while I was making the choices in my career of where I went, some of it was also being made, decisions were being made for me, because there were opportunities that were always offered to me that I would say yes, as opposed to me designing the path and then choosing from that perspective, if that makes sense. And I'm grateful for every opportunity, because it definitely opened up doors and gave me so much more that I'm able to, use and do now. But yeah, it was a little bit of a combination of people seeing things in me and directing me, which happens a lot to people in their careers. Which is a lot of, I think, many of the times why I would be into it and think, well, there's pieces I like and don't like, and, would I pick this for myself or not? And when I finally really, at the time I turned 50, decided I know what I want to do. And that's when I really made the decision, regardless of other people. Yeah. And, I've never looked back since then.
So you're saying when you turned 50, so that was after the accident?
That was after the accident.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The accident
clearly had a huge impact on you, maybe fast forwarding that decision, would you say?
That's exactly.
Now, I'm curious, because when, it kind of struck me when you said you became an associate dean, and having worked in higher ed myself, my experience is, it's one thing to be doing professional development, diversity work, and being an associate professor. Once you kind of step over the line and become a dean, the job and the work shifts significantly. The politics in the organization shifts significantly. And I heard you say it, and I'm thinking, I bet becoming a dean was also a turning point for you.
Yes.
And so, you were in the accident when you were a dean. Am I right about that?
Yes.
So tell us about that time, and then we're moving towards the part where you are today and what you're doing today. And we want to talk about the Career Rebel Academy and all that. So it was similar to what I knew pretty quickly as an attorney, that I don't think what I want to do. So quickly into becoming an associate dean, that's what happened to me before. What happened before, it happened again. And while I had been a director of graduate programs, it's still very different than stepping over into, the kind of the executive level of academia in that regard. And so that's not what I'm made up to be. The politics and all of that navigation and negotiation it was taking me away from what I really love to do, which was to connect to people, to work with people, to help, uplift people. And the further I got into that, I knew, this probably wasn't the best way to go, but it was a recommendation. My dean was like, you're so good at this. I think you would really do well here. And I thought, let me say yes to the opportunity. And it was not a happy time for sure. And the car accident, like, you said, definitely accelerated the exit from that. And that also brings up another good point. And I think you and I talked about this previous to this interview. And that is, just because you're good at something and can do it well doesn't mean that's where you're supposed to be.
100%.
There's no doubt in my mind, Carol, there's a lot of things you'd be good at, but that doesn't mean that's what you should be doing, or that's where your heart is, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a lot of people sort of fall into those. Oh, well, I hear clients say this all the time. well, I could do this. I could do that. I could do that. And I was like, that's great. You can do that. Do you want to do that?
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right. And that's what gets people trapped, because you have people say, but you're so good at it. And you get all this external feedback telling you that, well, it makes sense. And look at the income you're making and look at the title and you're good, but you're slowly on the inside dying. And it makes you start to wonder, and this goes back to the point of listening to that internal voice. When you get this external feedback, you start wondering, well, what's wrong with, well, why don't I should like it? Like, why don't I? Everyone else is telling me I should. And it does make sense. And I do have a good income and I can pay for my kids to go to school and take vacations. And, and so you get caught up into that and you don't realize that, no, but I don't like it. And that matters too.
Right.
Just because I can doesn't mean I should. And that's exactly right.
And it's tough. It's really
very tough.
Especially when you have kids and you're thinking about paying for school and all these other things, or, you want that extra vacation or that nice, I can see why people make those choices.
Yeah.
Yet, fast forward down the road and you realize, wow, I just spent, 10 years doing something I really don't like or even hate.
Exactly. And that's where the car accident for me, because I think ultimately I could say, honestly, I would have left, but would I have left as fast as I have done? No, but that accident really, because you start to realize you have fewer years ahead than behind.
Right.
And particularly in that accident that tomorrow's not promised, that could have been it for me. And, had the driver hit me head on and I not turned, that would have been the case. But, that just crystallized for me that what I want, I need to live the life that I want to live. And so it set me on the path to stepping out of that and stepping into what really made the most sense for me.
So what was the time frame between the accident and recovering and kind of processing that through and really making, really coming to that realization and making those decisions? I mean, I assume you had an extensive recovery time, but I can imagine that you were being very thoughtful at that time as well.
Yeah, it was 6 years. It was 6 years because that accident, I was in the hospital for almost a month and I had multiple surgeries over the course. Initially, I had 3, but I had a few more over the course of the year. I was in a wheelchair for about 7 months. And and had a lot of PTSD and therapy around it. So it took about 18 months to 2 years of recovery. And then once I was back on my feet again, it was, the continual process of this is not really where I want to be, and really just exploring that and asking myself some deeper questions and on before I was able to finally say, I'm good, I'm out.
And I wonder, I'm just curious, you must have had people surrounding you with lots of support and good wishes. And, did that make it harder to step away because everybody was wishing you so well?
It didn't make it harder.
Okay, good.
It not at all. I mean, because I was starting to come into a place where I was listening to myself more than others. So others, while I appreciated what they had to share, they were not going to be the dictators of what I, did, or it wasn't going to hold me captive. Yeah. Where in the past, maybe, that may have been different, but it definitely, that experience put me in a different place. And, I often talk about the reason why I survived the accident was because right when the lights were coming at me, I heard a voice as clear as it was sitting in the car say to turn now. And that haunted me after, during the recovery, this idea of turning, the idea of hearing a whisper or a loud voice tell you to make a move, to do something different. And I really took that metaphorically as a sign that I think so many times we hear these whispers and these voices to say, this isn't what you want, turn, go different, just go a different direction. But we don't listen. But for me, the way it helped to really solidify for me is that I know had I not turned, or made some type of turn, if I had gotten hit dead on, I wouldn't be here. And so it just became just so clear to me that we have to listen to that voice. There's something intuitively in us is trying to save our lives.
Yeah.
And maybe not physically, but definitely emotionally, mentally, and every other way. And that we really have to listen to it before it's too late.
I agree. And on top of that, when you are raising children and they're witnessing you as a professional and you as a working person, what's the role model you are being for them as you're raising them? Are they going to watch you just dialing it in every day? Or are they going to watch you doing work that you find fulfilling and meaningful? Because that sends them a very, very powerful message.
Oh, 100%. It's amazing talking to my kids now who are in their early 20s, talk about seeing me. I remember when I told my kids that I was going to leave my job and start my own business. My daughter said, "Are we going to be poor? Does that mean we're going to be poor? Like, what's going on?" But now looking at me, they tell me how proud they are, how that inspires them, how it lets them know so much is possible that they can do, that, that they can do whatever they want to do, that they don't have to be limited. And so I hear them now in their 20s look back over these years with such like pride and joy and excitement for what it means for them to see that. So you are so right. What they're watching. And if they see us burnt out and drudgery and hating our jobs, I mean, that's the message we're sending to them. But if they see that we have a choice, that's what work is. Yeah. But when they see you actually have a choice and that you can love what you do and you don't have to be trapped, it gives them so much freedom to explore things that are interesting for them.
So when you started to think about, Just Turn, did you think that it would turn into something that would be your own thing, or were you thinking about working somewhere else? How did you come to the decision to open up your own shop, so to speak?
Well, I asked myself a lot of questions about what do I love? How do I love to work? Questions that we often don't ask ourselves.
Right.
And I was just at a place where I thought, I don't want to work for anyone else. I don't want other people's. I knew I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to create my own type of thing, to do the work I wanted to do in the way that I wanted to do it, and not have to compromise. That's a strong word, but really, I didn't want to try to fit into something else. I think that's a better way to frame it. I didn't want to try to fit in and love 80% of what I did, but not 20% and everything else that went along with that. And I thought, I know exactly what the work that I want to do. I know who I want to do it with. I know how I want to do it. So I'm gonna go for it. And it was scary as all get out, but I went for it. Hearing my father's voice, really, I went for it. And the year before I started my business, my father passed. And in many ways, I feel like that his passing gave me that much more fuel, because his voice of, go for it, do it. He would talk to me when I became a lawyer about, you should hang out your shingles, start your own law firm. He would say that to me. Wow. At the time I thought, oh my goodness, no, I'm not ready for that. But I just heard his voice and his faith and his belief in me. And I think it just really helped to catapult me to really step into doing my own work.
Well, and I think when you lose someone that close to you, there's such a finite feeling about that. That it does. There's a way in which, and yet another way, life stares you in the face and you say, hey, it's, what am I waiting for? Right.
Exactly.
So tell us about your business and what you're doing. You've mentioned a couple of things already: coaching, consulting, working with teams, and the Career Rebel Academy. Tell us everything.
Yeah. Well, that's my thing. I love working specifically with high achieving women at midlife, women who are at this fabulous stage of life where things are a little bit confusing, that there's, they're deciding the spending habits of, at this point, parents and kids, as well as their own family, where their identity is a little muddled between what they do and who they are. There's that midlife pivot is such a powerful time in life where society is basically like, oh, you're done. you know, like we're on to the 20-year-olds behind you, and so there's a lot of questions about what's next. What do I do? Because you're not at the end of the road, but you also know that, you still have another 20, 30 years ahead, but what does that look like? Because you've already done all the things you think you should be doing over the past 20 or 30 years. So I love this population. And so I work with women who are at that place of, I want to know what's next, and it's not what it's been, and to really help them do that. And I do that. I initially was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching around that. I would sometimes come into organizations and work with small groups of women and women leaders around it. But I decided most recently, I created what I call my Career Rebel Academy, which I love. And then recently launched my own podcast, the Midlife Career Rebel. And and I wanted to, the reason I called it that and the reason I created it was I wanted to, again, as I said before, I believe in this community and having a space where women could come together and be supported with other like-minded women who are going through what they're going through, and have a space where they could reclaim themselves and reclaim their identity and reinforce their confidence and increase their courage level to really live and design the life that they want, and not what people have suggested or told them, or get off of autopilot and actually get in the driver's seat and take control over this next, the next 20, 30 or 40 years they have ahead.
Right. Yeah. I love it. Well, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yes.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. I can see how anyone whose life you touch is going to benefit tremendously from working with you.
I appreciate that.
And so tell us a little more about what it means to be involved with the Academy.
Yeah. So usually, when the women come in, it's a 9-month engagement. Mm-hmm. And the reason why, it's a 9-month engagement is that I always tell people, you didn't get to where you are overnight, and unraveling all of those preconceived ideas, those thought patterns, those narratives that have kind of maybe kept you trapped where you've been for so long. It takes a moment to look them face to face and unravel that, deconstruct that before you can build something new. And so what I wanted to do was to create a space for them to take their time, but get the support and have the accountability to be able to go through that process. So they didn't have to do it alone. Because as soon as you start engaging and breaking down those old thought patterns and beliefs, your brain doesn't like to be uncomfortable or challenged. Yeah. That amygdala goes like, what are you doing?
Oh, that's right.
So you need support to make sure that you can, hold steady and move through. So it's not really for women who are like, oh, I just want a different job or to go, but really who are wanting to dig into that deeper work to figure out who they are and what the next path that makes the most sense for them.
Right. That's great. Yeah. Well, we're going to have all the links to all of this, all your social media handles, and a link directly to the Career Rebel Academy. And we'll also include a link to your podcast in the show notes for sure, because I want to make sure that people know exactly where to find you and benefit from all the amazing work you're doing.
Thank you.
Really excited about everything that you're up to.
Thank you.
The world is hungry for all of this. I want to wrap up with a question for you. In thinking about people who are considering what's next for them, what would be a key piece of advice you would give to somebody who's beginning to contemplate a transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say to find a place to be still and really listen to yourself and ask yourself what you want. And don't censor yourself, because oftentimes what happens is people will ask themselves that question and something will pop up and they'll be like, oh, that's crazy. Oh, I can never do that. Oh, yeah. And so they immediately judge and censor and cut that out. And then ultimately what gets on the paper is what they're already doing. And so I would say, find a quiet space and just allow yourself to tap back into that childish curiosity.
Yes.
And just let it flow. Just ask yourself what you would love to do. Where would you love to be? Who would you love to be connecting with? Right. Yeah. And just let it all out on paper and then take a look at it and to see what comes up for you, because I think your heart's desire will start pouring out in a way that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to see that or give it the opportunity before.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need to give yourself time to let it come out, because sometimes it's been so tamped down.
Yeah.
That, it really does, but it's in there, right?
It's in there.
It's definitely in there.
Absolutely.
I know it.
Yeah.
Well, Carol, or Dr. Carol, Dr. Carol Parker Walsh, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a joy and a pleasure. I am so glad that you turned that day when that car was coming at you. I am excited to see what your next will be as well. And I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much. This has been fabulous. And thank you for letting me in your company and your community. It's a pleasure meeting you. And this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Carol Parker Walsh. It was so interesting to speak with her to learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find the links on the blog page of my website at tammygoolerloeb.com. Just look for episode 157. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Perhaps maybe you're feeling just a little stuck? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles to Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available for pre-sale, or you can wait till January 25th, 2022, when it'll be available for sale in print and digital ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. If you were inspired by this episode with Dr. Carol, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd so appreciate it if you'd leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. Drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.